So one of the first jobs I want to do is start shuffling around some of my roses. So we've got the leader rose, which is the type of damask rose here, and we've also got Isafan, which is the damask rose here. As you can see, they're in quite poor health. They were pot grown for a long time, and then I put them into my allotment to try and grow them on. However, due to the high water table and also the quite heavy clay we had there, you can see they've just not had such good growth. On the other hand, one of the other damask roses I've got over in my drier border has actually done really well in this garden. So I thought I'll bring them here and they'll become sort of part of the hedging on the sunnier side of the garden. So they'll be actually replacing the Persica roses I've got in the back border here. And also it's a better position because what we're looking to do is expand the border we have at the moment. And that'll put these quite thorny, aggressive roses at the back. So the plan will be this. We've got Isafan, which is the pink double damask rose that will go in place of this Persica rose here. And then the other one that actually has been grown quite healthily in the garden in a dry bed will actually move over here to replace this other Persica rose. These will pair quite nicely because they look very similar. They both have the pink flowers and they're also very similar sort of height and growth structure. Also, because we're expanding the bed where I currently am on the old footpath, this will be part of the future bed. I just don't want to dig it right now. But it will mean that these quite thorny roses won't be catching on anyone in the garden. What that means though is that the Persica roses could get flooded out, and actually I want to move them into the dry bed instead. So this is a little bit painful to do because this is actually growing quite well here, but in the long run it's not where I want it, so it's better to move it now while it's still only a year old, and I'll just gently go around with the fork, not forcing it out of place, just trying to get as much of the compost with it as possible to prevent it from going into shock. And also, given it's still very early in the season, sort of just into late winter, early spring, it should hopefully grow okay. And it comes out nice and easy because the soil's quite good condition here. Just take that. And for now, just leave it here while I work the other rows out. And I'm also just going to mulch it down with more general purpose. That will allow the worms to take it down, condition the soil more, and also give it a nice gentle feed throughout the season. So that's one switched over. So this is actually the Kalazinic rose, and this is the damask rose they grow in Bulgaria, and would have been similar to the original one in Persia, and is used for rose oil, which is one of the most expensive oils that can be made. So it's quite a ethnobotanically significant one, but it also smells really nice. And then we just repeat that with the other rose. Now, this is a little bit thicker. The garden in general has got a real mix of sand and clay, just where it was a new build in the 90s. The gardens themselves weren't necessarily the best quality soil. And so I'm going to be adding some compost into this just to break it up so it gets to the sort of sandier texture as we got with the other part of the bed. And then that'll be perfect for planting into. Now, what I'm doing here is obviously disturbing the soil a lot, and where possible, it's better not to. One, for the sake of preventing weeds. Obviously, disturbing the soil makes it more possible for weeds to invade into your garden, but also for the sake of the wildlife in your garden that will actually help keep your soil in good condition. But there's also another thing to remember, and that is that, especially with the way the wild processes work, ecological processes, is this disturbance is what allows things to root a lot easier. And so by putting that rose in now, although some weeds will spring up, it will leave a lot more oxygen and competition, and less competition for the rose, get bigger. And this will be the main time I disturb it. Once I put the sort of plants in their final locations, I'll hardly dig the garden. I'll be mostly mulching, going for more of a no-dig approach, but I typically like to dig the bed quite a lot before when I first put plants in. There's a bit of clay also coming up there. And although this plant isn't quite in as good health as the other one, or basically near dead, where it's been sort of maybe in too high a water content and probably a little bit starved of oxygen in the heavy clay, it should hopefully rebound in the earlier part of the season, as the sort of Bulgarian roses are sort of earlier season plants. I'm also considering obviously the width of this plant in relation to the other plants around it and the fence, because they do get so big. But I will add, it's a bit of an experimentation with this one. Like I say, I grew these on my plot or in pots and normally away from the walls a bit. So if I get it mistake this right time, then I'll correct it in the future. But for now, I want to see how we go. And I'll just pat down with the spade as well. Sorry, but the graft node partly visible, slightly buried. It depends really. There's no specific way. I like to better see it because I don't want to have anything growing from below, because that won't be the plant that I want it to be. And the future plan is that the leader rose, which is the nice sort of white petaled one with the sort of pink bleed on the edge, will go around this sort of area here. But as you can see, we've still got the old footpath here, and so that needs to be turned, as it's quite compacted, so it needs to be turned into before I can do so. So I'm just watering as close to the surface as possible, trying to avoid wetting the leaves, as one, we're in quite a humid climate anyway, so we get issues with mildew, etc. on the plants, but also roses obviously notoriously get things like black spot, which is what devastated much of the early rose gardens. So by avoiding watering the leaves, we reduce the risk of the black spot. So it's a new day. We've planted the damask roses in the border, and what I want to do now is to use what is effectively redundant space now, which is the old path that's now blocked by the greenhouse, and to expand this bed to allow the rose to grow out as much as it wants in this bed, but also to allow us to plant in front of it and make use of arguably one of the sunniest parts of the garden. The problem we've got obviously is that this is a compacted soil from where it's been used as a path. You can feel it underfoot, and also it retains moisture constantly at the moment. My thought pattern with this is that instead of trying to dig it, especially as we still had some rains and quite a lot of moisture throughout the winter, is I'm going to take off the turf and then look to try and add nutrition into the soil, and then eventually that will break it down naturally. I'm hoping that by the time we go around to digging in the old rows, it may have dried up and may have loosened slightly. So as we stated, we're just going to take the hoe and sort of run that through and taking off the turf. You can see that it's very compacted, so I don't really want to dig it too much. This here is the compost I'll be making use of. Now, this was made from when I first moved in, taking off some turf when I was making the beds. So that's sort of composted down turf. There's also expended soil in there. So just a real mixture of things. And it is quite fibrous, as you'll see. There's literally things like bracken in there, but it's not necessarily a bad thing in this instance because I'll be using it as like a topsoil. It will help, especially with my soil where it's quite sandy, will help retain some of that moisture. And over time it'll break down anyway, so it shouldn't be a problem. But as we go through, I'll be picking out any things that haven't composted down heavily anyway, so it shouldn't be a problem in that regard.
Among the many qualities of the Damascus rose, one of the things that really caught my attention when I first heard of it was the legend of how the Damascus rose supposedly came to Europe. Supposedly, the story goes that in the 1100s, during the Crusades, a French soldier came upon the rose during the siege of Damascus, and as a spoil of war took it back to France. And although we don't know if there's any truth to this story, very likely not, I always quite like to think about some of the culture as well that sort of surrounds the plants, whether that be historical ethnobotanical culture or even some of the more modern folk tales surrounding them too.
So off camera, I have made some adjustments to the rose bed. So you would have remembered we used to have some of the English roses, David Austin ones particularly, along this part of the rose walk. Well, the bed is still here and this needs shifting, but those actual roses have now been shifted into a more natural formation in the larger bed itself. So we've got Astute Chevaille over there, so that's quite a nice large pink peachy sort of colour. This one here, which is Desdemona, which is maybe one of my favourites, and again it's sort of a starts off pink, sort of peach colour, goes into a white as it matures into a larger inflorescence, and then has some sort of yellow hints within that. And again, it's a sort of medium to large English rose. And then the last one, which is really nice, it's a bit more of a orangey hue to it, and that's Pearl d'Or, and that will be closer to the warmer, more exotic bed. So this is here near the fig tree, and obviously you see the corner here where we're going to have more of the exotic plants. And so actually I think having that warmer colour in this corner here really works well, and it's a smaller shrub rose, that one, so actually it fits quite nicely in this gap here. The other things we've done is we've shifted some of the lavenders around, taking some of them out. Some of them need to come out and move more to the front of the bed or into other parts of the garden, because this probably will be quite a well-fed bed. It's going to be a mixture of Mediterranean planting and some English native planting as well, but I would just want to make this absolutely filled with herbaceous annuals on top of some of these evergreens. So we've got a lot of the evergreen structure in. We probably need to get some more. As you can see, it's still a little bit bare, even though these roses will all get quite big. You can see we've got 1, 2, and in the corner we've got a third artichoke. So they are the, you'll see I've would sown some new ones for the new year, but that is, gosh, I can't remember the variety now. It's a purple variety, purple globe variety. And that will be both structural but also for eating as well. And one of the other plants we have shifted is this lovely pink lavender at the front here now.